It was one of those mornings when the sky seemed unwilling to wake up. A fine mist hung over Bellevue, blurring the edges of the houses and making the streets shimmer in soft gray light. Inside the Hamiltons' kitchen, the faint hiss of the stove was the only sound breaking the silence. Jenna stood by the counter, flipping pancakes that were slowly browning in the pan. She moved automatically, her motions precise, almost mechanical, as if her hands remembered what her heart no longer felt. Marcus sat at the table, dressed in his pressed shirt and navy tie, scrolling through his phone. The smell of coffee filled the room, but he didn't look up when she placed a mug beside him. "Thanks," he muttered, eyes still fixed on the screen. "You're welcome," Jenna said softly, though the words sounded too polite, too formal for a married couple. He took a sip and winced slightly. "You used the dark roast again." "I thought you liked it," she replied, turning the pancake before it could burn. "I used to," he said simply, then returned to his messages. The air thickened with the kind of silence that carries words left unsaid. Jenna slid a pancake onto a plate and noticed the edges were burnt. She tried scraping them with a knife, but the dark crust clung stubbornly. A sigh escaped her lips. She placed the plate in front of him anyway. Marcus glanced down, then back at her. "You don't have to make breakfast every morning. I can grab something at the hospital." "I know," she said quietly. "It's just habit." "Maybe break that one," he replied, his tone calm but detached, as if talking to a colleague instead of his wife. He rose from the chair, adjusted his tie, and gathered his briefcase. When the front door closed behind him, the house seemed to exhale. Jenna stood still for a long moment, staring at the untouched pancake on his plate. The syrup she'd poured had formed a slow, sticky circle around the burnt edge, glistening under the dull morning light. She sat down and wrapped her hands around her own mug, now cold. Outside, raindrops slid lazily down the window. It had been raining like this when she first met Marcus, two young nurses on a night shift, laughing over vending machine coffee. He'd been charming then, brilliant, ambitious. He used to look at her like she was the only steady thing in his chaotic world. When he proposed, she'd left her position at the clinic without hesitation. "I'll take care of us," he'd said, and she believed him. For years she supported him through residency, long shifts, exhaustion. Every success of his felt like theirs. Now, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass, Jenna wondered when that partnership had disappeared. Somewhere between the white coats, the conferences, and the long nights at work, something had changed. He had changed. She reached for the pancake and took a bite, just to feel something. It was cold, bitter, and overdone. She chewed anyway. The burnt taste stayed in her mouth, sharp and real, like a truth she didn't want to admit. Outside, a horn sounded faintly on the wet street, then faded. Jenna leaned back, eyes on the window, and whispered to herself, "It's just the rain." But deep down, she knew the silence in the house wasn't from the weather, it was from him. The first call came just after noon. Jenna had been sorting laundry in the quiet house when the landline rang, a sound she rarely heard anymore. She wiped her hands on a towel and picked up. "Hello." There was nothing, only a faint rustle, like wind brushing against fabric. Then the line went dead. She frowned, checked the caller ID. Unknown number. An hour later, it happened again. This time she heard breathing, slow, shallow, as if someone was there but afraid to speak. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice sharper. The call ended with a click. By evening, she had convinced herself it was a wrong number. Bellevue was quiet, and rain blurred the city outside. She made dinner, the television murmuring in the background, but she couldn't shake the unease. When Marcus came home, Jenna mentioned it casually, trying not to sound paranoid. "I've been getting strange calls all day. No one answers when I pick up." Marcus hung his coat, barely glancing at her. "Probably telemarketers." It didn't sound like that. He smirked. "You're imagining things again, Jenna. You need a hobby." She forced a laugh, but the dismissal stung. That night, she lay in bed, listening to the rain tap against the window. Marcus was in his study downstairs, typing on his laptop. The faint glow of the screen slipped through the half-open door. She wanted to believe he was finishing reports, not texting someone else. Her mind drifted to the night before, the call that had woken her around midnight. Marcus's phone had vibrated on the nightstand. He'd reached for it instantly, reading something with a flicker of a smile, then said there was a last-minute surgery. "Don't wait up," he'd murmured, already pulling on his clothes. But he hadn't smelled like the hospital when he left. There was perfume in the air, a soft, expensive scent she'd known. When the door closed behind him, Jenna had stood alone in the dim light, her hands trembling, the faint trail of perfume lingering long after his car disappeared into the rain. Now, lying awake, she tried to push the memory away. She told herself he was working hard, that he was just tired, that every marriage went through cold seasons. Still, the silence between them had become a living thing, thick, watchful, waiting for her to admit what she already knew. Another call came at 11:42 p.m. She sat up, heart pounding, and reached for the phone on the nightstand. "Hello." Again, the same hush, but this time she heard it, barely a sigh, almost human, before the line went dead. Jenna stayed awake for hours after that, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the rain turned heavier, washing over the empty streets of Seattle. Streetlights flickered, their reflections stretching like golden veins across the wet asphalt. In that glow, the city looked beautiful and lonely, exactly how she felt. Luna Bistro was the kind of place that smelled like roasted coffee and old wood, warm, familiar, slightly nostalgic. Rain streaked down the windows in narrow ribbons as Jenna walked in, shaking off her umbrella. The soft jazz in the background mixed with the low hum of conversation. Danielle Brooks was already there, seated by the window, her wine glass half full. She looked effortless, elegant as always, pearls navy dress, and the quiet confidence of someone who had already survived the worst. "Jenna," Danielle greeted, rising to hug her. "You look pale. Are you sleeping at all?" Jenna forced a smile. "I've had restless nights." They sat. A waiter came, poured Jenna a cup of chamomile tea, and left them in the glow of the candlelight. Danielle studied her friend carefully, eyes sharp but kind. "It's Marcus, isn't it?" she asked softly. "You don't have to tell me, I can see it." Jenna hesitated, tracing the rim of her cup. "He's distant, colder than ever. Sometimes he doesn't come home until morning. Says it's an emergency surgery, but I don't know anymore." Danielle leaned back, "And when you ask, he says I'm imagining things." Jenna's voice cracked. "He barely looks at me, Danielle. We used to talk for hours. Now I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Her friend sighed, swirling the wine. "I've been there," she said quietly. "You start doubting your own instincts. But Jenna, intuition is the last thing to lose." Jenna shook her head. "What if I'm wrong? What if it's really just work?" Danielle gave a faint smile, though her tone stayed firm. "Then you'll have peace of mind. But if you're right, and I think you are, you'll need proof." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. "Michael Rowan, private investigator, ex-military, discreet, professional. He helped me once, years ago." Jenna took the card, feeling the embossed name beneath her fingertips. "A detective? Danielle, that feels extreme. So is losing yourself in suspicion." Danielle's gaze softened. "Sometimes the truth is the only way to survive. Whatever it is, knowing will hurt less than guessing." The words hung in the air like the last note of a song. Jenna looked out the window. The rain had turned heavier, beating against the glass in steady rhythm. On the street outside, the neon sign of a florist flickered, its reflection melting in the puddles. "I don't want to destroy my marriage," she whispered. You're not destroying anything, Danielle said. You're just refusing to live blind. They sat in silence for a moment. The waiter refilled the glasses. The room smelled faintly of lemon and wine. Jenna tucked the card into her purse as if it were a fragile secret. When they stood to leave, Danielle touched her arm gently. Call him tomorrow. Don't wait too long, Jenna. Secrets have a way of growing teeth. Outside, the rain had eased into mist again. Jenna pulled her coat tighter and walked toward her car. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, bending and blurring as though Seattle itself were holding its breath, waiting for what she would do next. The next morning, the rain had not yet stopped. It fell in a quiet drizzle that blurred the glass front of Maple and Steam, a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop in downtown Seattle. Jenna arrived early, clutching the business card Danielle had given her. The smell of espresso and wet pavement filled the air. She chose a corner table facing the window, her reflection faint in the fogged glass. A few minutes later, the bell above the door chimed. A tall man in a charcoal coat stepped in, shook the rain from his shoulders, and scanned the room with sharp, assessing eyes. When their gazes met, Jenna recognized him immediately. Michael Rowan, the private investigator. He approached with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen too much and no longer needed to prove anything. His voice was calm, measured. Mrs. Hamilton? Yes, Jenna said, standing halfway before sitting again. He nodded once, removed his gloves, and sat opposite her. Danielle told me you'd reach out. She said it's personal. It is, Jenna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The waitress came and took their orders. Black coffee for him, green tea for her. As soon as she walked away, Michael placed a small notebook on the table. Tell me everything you can. Start with why you think your husband's having an affair. Jenna hesitated. The word affair sounded too sharp, too final. I'm not sure, she began, but he's been different. Distant. He comes home late, says it's work. I used to believe that. Michael's pen scratched quietly across the page. His profession? He's a surgeon. Orthopedic. Name of the hospital? Evergreen Medical Center. He nodded. And his full name? Dr. Marcus Hamilton. Michael's eyes lifted briefly. Doctors are tricky. They work odd hours. Easy cover stories. You said he's been coming home late. How late? Sometimes past midnight. Once or twice, not at all. He says there was an emergency surgery. Michael leaned back, studying her expression. Do you believe him? Jenna stared into her cup. I used to. There was a pause. Then he asked, does he drive the same car? Yes, a black Lexus RX, plate number WFX 829. Any changes in his schedule? Weekends away. Conferences. He went to Portland last month for a medical seminar, she said, making air quotes unconsciously. But when I called his hotel, the front desk said there was no reservation under his name. Michael's brow lifted slightly, though he said nothing. He kept writing, each line short and precise. When he finished, he closed the notebook and looked at her for a long moment. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. Jenna blinked. Who? My sister, he replied. She used to have that same look, like she was carrying something heavy but didn't want anyone to see it. Something about his tone made Jenna's throat tighten. What happened to her? She believed someone's lies for too long, he said simply. They sat in silence for a beat, the rain tapping against the window. Then Michael straightened. All business again. I'll take the case. You'll need to be patient. It may take days, maybe weeks. I'll document everything. Photos, locations, timestamps. Jenna reached for her purse. How much will it cost? He waved a hand. Danielle's a friend. I'll charge a minimal fee, just enough to cover travel and equipment. She looked both relieved and embarrassed. Thank you. I never thought I'd be hiring someone to spy on my husband. Michael gave a faint, understanding smile. You're not spying, Mrs. Hamilton. You're protecting yourself. As he left, Jenna stayed seated for a while, watching him disappear into the rain. For the first time in months, she felt both lighter and smaller at once, relieved to have taken a step and ashamed that she had to. The tea had gone cold, but she drank it anyway, letting the bitterness sit on her tongue like a confession. The announcement came over dinner, casual and unremarkable, like so many things Marcus said these days. He set his fork down, glancing briefly at Jenna. I'm hosting a birthday party next week, he said. Just a small gathering. I'll handle the arrangements. Jenna paused mid-bite. You're planning it yourself? He nodded, sipping his wine. It's simpler that way. Don't worry about anything. Just show up. It was meant to sound practical, but to Jenna, it felt like a lock clicking shut. For years, she had planned every celebration. His residency graduation, their anniversaries, even his hospital charity events. It wasn't just about balloons or cake, it was how she showed care. Being excluded now felt like being erased. She smiled faintly. Of course, whatever you want. Marcus didn't notice the flicker of sadness in her voice. It's mostly colleagues. You'll meet some of them. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, dress nicely. That night, Jenna lay awake listening to the soft hum of rain against the window. She thought of the woman she'd been, confident, warm, always certain of her place beside him. Somewhere along the years, that version of herself had vanished, replaced by someone quiet, cautious, always waiting for permission. When Saturday arrived, she decided, perhaps foolishly, to fight back in the only way she could. She booked an appointment at a salon downtown. The hairdresser suggested a layered cut that framed her face. Something fresh, the woman said cheerfully, and for a brief moment, Jenna caught her reflection and saw a spark she hadn't seen in years. She got her nails done, chose subtle makeup, and pulled from her closet the crimson dress Marcus had once said he loved. It had been years since she wore it. She stared at herself in the mirror before leaving, whispering softly, maybe he'll see me again. The venue was an upscale restaurant near the waterfront, full of glass walls and warm light. The crowd buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Marcus was already there, surrounded by his colleagues, perfectly composed in his navy suit. He looked like a man entirely at home in his world. When he saw her, he smiled politely, kissed her cheek, and said, You look nice. Just nice. Nothing more. Then he turned to greet another guest. Jenna's heart tightened. She forced herself to mingle, smiling when appropriate, laughing when someone joked, though her mind kept circling back to him. It was halfway through the evening when Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Come, I want you to meet someone. He guided her through the crowd to a woman standing by the bar, a young brunette in a fitted black dress, elegant, yet effortlessly confident. Jenna, this is Dr. Vanessa Hartman, Marcus said, his tone smooth, a colleague from the orthopedic department. Vanessa extended her hand, her smile practiced and charming. It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you all the time. Does he? Jenna replied, keeping her voice steady. She caught the brief glance that passed between them. Too familiar, too intimate for two people who were supposedly just co-workers. As the evening went on, Jenna noticed the small things, the way Marcus leaned in when Vanessa spoke, how their laughter overlapped, how his eyes softened in a way they hadn't for her in months. She tried to dismiss it, to tell herself it was paranoia, but deep down, something in her chest went still, like a quiet realization forming without permission. When the night ended and the last guests drifted away, Jenna smiled, kissed her husband's cheek, and whispered, "Happy birthday." He thanked her distractedly, already looking at his phone. Outside, the Seattle wind, carried the scent of the bay. Jenna walked to the car slowly, the red fabric of her dress fluttering in the cool night air. Behind her, laughter still echoed from the restaurant, but none of it sounded like celebration. When the last guest had left and the restaurant lights dimmed, Jenna thought they would finally go home together. She reached for her coat, but Marcus's voice stopped her. "I have to make a quick stop," he said, checking his watch. "Dr. Hartman's hosting a small after-party. It's mostly senior staff. I should go." Jenna frowned. "Another party? It's almost 10. He gave a short laugh. "You know Leonard. He likes to celebrate everything twice." "Then let me come with you," she said quickly. "I'll stay quiet, I promise. I'd love to meet him properly." Marcus's expression shifted, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "It's not that kind of event, Jenna. It's work. You'd be bored out of your mind." "I don't mind," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "It's your birthday. I just want to be with you." He sighed, already turning toward the door. "You don't understand. This is about networking, not romance. I'll be late, don't wait up." Before she could reply, he kissed the air near her cheek and walked away, leaving her standing in the cool night wind. His car disappeared down the hill, taillights glowing red against the slick pavement. Jenna drove home alone. The house was dark and quiet when she entered, the faint hum of the refrigerator echoing through the emptiness. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table and stared at the clock. 10:30, then 11, midnight. She tried reading, watching television, scrolling through her phone, anything to distract herself, but her eyes kept flicking to the time glowing on the oven display. At one point, she even texted him, "Are you still at the party?" The message showed delivered but never read. By 2 a.m., the wine glass was empty and her thoughts were heavy. She stood by the window, watching the rain drizzle over the driveway, every sound amplified in the silence. Her reflection looked pale and foreign, someone's wife waiting for a husband who might not be coming home. When she finally heard the garage door open, her chest tightened with a mixture of relief and dread. Marcus entered quietly, his tie loosened, his shirt slightly wrinkled. "You're still up?" he asked, as if surprised. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "How was the party?" He shrugged, setting his briefcase down. "Fine. We just had a few drinks. Talked shop. Until 2 in the morning." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Leonard likes to discuss business after hours. You wouldn't understand." Jenna crossed her arms. "You didn't answer my text." His tone sharpened. "I was busy, Jenna. Do you need a full itinerary every time I go out?" Her voice trembled. "No, I worry, that's all." Marcus let out a long, exasperated sigh, running a hand through his hair. "You've been acting paranoid lately. Maybe it's stress." Or he gave a faint smirk. "Maybe menopause is coming early." The words landed like a slap. Jenna froze, her breath catching in her throat. He walked past her toward the stairs, already done with the conversation. "Go to bed," he said without turning back. "We'll talk tomorrow." She stood in the living room long after he disappeared upstairs. The rain outside had stopped, but the sound of water dripping from the gutters echoed like a clock ticking away something irretrievable. For the first time, Jenna didn't cry. She just stood there, numb, realizing that the man she'd once trusted with her entire life now spoke to her like she was a stranger, and perhaps in some irreversible way, she was. 3 days passed in heavy silence. Marcus behaved as though nothing had happened, as though the cruel words he'd thrown at her that night were simply erased by the sunrise. He went to work early, came home late, and avoided eye contact over dinner. Jenna no longer asked questions. She simply existed beside him, quiet and hollow. On the 4th morning, her phone buzzed. A message from Michael Rowan. "We need to meet. Maple and Steam. Noon." Her stomach tightened. She typed back one word, "Okay," and stared at the screen for a long moment before moving. The same rain that had followed her all week was still falling, soft and cold. At Maple and Steam, she found Michael already waiting in their usual corner. He was nursing a cup of black coffee, a thin manila folder on the table before him. His expression was unreadable, his posture rigid. "Mrs. Hamilton," he said, standing briefly before sitting again. "I've got something for you." Jenna's hands trembled slightly as she Saturday. "You found something?" He slid the folder toward her. "You'll want to look at these." She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were a dozen printed photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Marcus, her husband, standing beside a woman outside the Mariners' Hotel. Another shot of them entering a suite together. Then one more, later that night, him holding her close in the parking lot, his hand brushing her cheek. Jenna stared, her face blank. Her fingers brushed the glossy paper, cold and slick beneath her touch. Michael spoke quietly. "That's not all." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second page, a brief report neatly typed. "The woman's name is Dr. Vanessa Hartman. She's not just a colleague. She's the wife of your husband's boss, Dr. Leonard Hartman, director of Evergreen Medical Center." The words landed like thunder in a soundproof room. Jenna didn't move, didn't blink. She simply kept her eyes on the photos, her husband smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at her in years. The image felt foreign, almost obscene. Michael waited, patient but tense, as if bracing for an outburst. But it never came. After a long silence, Jenna spoke, her voice low and steady. "How long?" "From what I can tell, at least 6 months. Most of the meetings happen at that hotel or during so-called weekend conferences. They're careful, but not careful enough." Jenna nodded once, her hand tightening around the folder. "Does Leonard know?" "Not yet," Michael said, "but he will. Secrets like this don't stay buried long, especially when both parties work under the same roof." She leaned back, staring out the window. The rain had thickened into a gray curtain, blurring the city beyond the glass. Her reflection looked almost ghostly, pale, calm, unrecognizable. Michael's voice softened. "I've done this job a long time. I've seen people react in all kinds of ways. Rage, panic, denial. But take my advice, don't do anything rash. Let the truth do the damage for you. Men, like him, they collapse under their own weight." Jenna gave a faint, almost bitter smile. "You think the truth will destroy him?" "It always does," he said simply. She gathered the photos carefully, placing them back into the folder. Her movements were precise, deliberate. Then she looked at Michael, her eyes dry but fierce. "Thank you," she said. He hesitated. "Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine," she replied quietly. "I just stopped expecting the truth to hurt." As she left the cafe, the wind caught her coat, and the rain struck her face in sharp, cold drops. She didn't flinch. The city moved around her, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying under umbrellas. But everything felt distant, muffled. She walked slowly to her car, the folder clutched against her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. She only thought one thing, clear and steady. If betrayal was the fire, then silence would be her weapon. Jenna drove home with the folder pressed against her chest like a small, heavy promise. The house smelled of the faint laundry detergent she liked. The sound of the rain on the roof made the rooms feel smaller. She set the folder on the kitchen table, opened it again just to make sure the photos were real, then reached for the small USB tucked into a corner of the manila envelope. Michael had told her it might be useful. She hadn't expected how very useful. She sat at the island, the laptop already open from earlier in the day. The USB slid into the port with a soft click. Files appeared, photographs, time-stamped, organized into folders by date and location. Jenna scrolled slowly, each image a smooth, Clinical shard, Marcus and Vanessa stepping out of a hotel. Marcus with his arm around her waist. Vanessa laughing with a hand to his chest as if sharing a private joke. There was nothing theatrical about the pictures. They were quiet, mundane, and therefore irrevocable. Her hands did not tremble. They moved with careful, practiced steadiness. She copied the files to a new folder on the desktop, then opened a browser and navigated to Marcus's account when he was away. His password habits were predictable, and the files she had were more than enough. In the hospital's internal directory listing, she found what she needed: an address book, departmental lists, and email roster. Names she recognized. Names she'd hear at dinners, on voicemails, in the quiet corridors of Evergreen Medical Center. She did not compose a dramatic message. There was no need for flourish. Jenna created a new email, attached the folder labeled with dates, and typed a single sentence into the body. Please see attached. She pasted the hospital list into the recipient line. Administration, department heads, staff physicians, nursing coordinators. Hundreds of addresses. She added Leonard Hartman's direct email at the top. She looked at the screen for a long moment, the cursor blinking like a metronome. No trembling, no fevered breath, just a cold clarity that felt larger than any anger. She hit send. The server took a breath. Messages dispersed into the network and then into other people's mornings, into inboxes that would open with coffee, into phones that would buzz during rounds, into offices where reputations either held or collapsed. Jenna closed the laptop when the confirmation pinged. It felt smaller than she'd imagined and infinitely more final. She poured a cup of tea and sat by the kitchen window. The rain had softened to a fine mist that smeared the city lights into a watercolor blur. Outside, cars glided past, their headlights casting long, careful reflections on the wet street. Jenna watched as the world kept moving, unaware for a sliver of time of the change she had set in motion. When her phone rang, Marcus was frantic on the other end. His voice fractured between disbelief and anger. Someone hacked my email. They sent these photos to everyone. My inbox is full of replies. What is happening? Jenna. His words fell like stones. She listened, and for the first time in months there was a stillness inside her that was not hollow. It was held. It wasn't a hack, she said, her voice measured, not loud. I sent them. There was a long, stunned silence. You what? Why would you do that? His disbelief tasted like pleading. She looked at the street again, at the flattening rain. Because you lied. Because you left perfume in the hallway and lies on the bedside table. Because you thought your life in two worlds could continue without consequence. Because the truth is the only thing left that's honest between us. Words piled up on Marcus's side of the line. Pleas, denials, accusations. Jenna let them wash over her like a tide. She did not need to defend herself. She had done something precise and deliberate, not cruel for cruelty's sake, but designed to expose what had been hidden behind polite smiles and office events. After she hung up, she did not celebrate. There was no sense of triumph, only the exact, cold satisfaction of a plan completed. She folded her hands and breathed. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed. She whispered to the empty room. Not quite a threat and not quite a prayer. Let's see how you like it now, Marcus. Outside, the city began to stir. Emails opened. Conversation started. Reputation shifted, and Jenna sat very still, aware that the quiet she had chosen would soon be answered in noise. The next morning began with Marcus's voice cracking through the house like an alarm. Jenna, someone hacked my email. Jenna was standing by the kitchen counter, stirring sugar into her coffee when he stormed in, his phone clutched in his hand, eyes wild. His hair was unkempt, shirt half-buttoned. They sent pictures, Jenna, fake ones. To everyone. My entire department has seen them. She turned slowly, her expression calm, almost detached. They're not fake. He froze. What? No one hacked you, she said evenly. It was me. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Then his voice broke into a shout. "You did what? You destroyed my career. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done." Her tone didn't waver. "And so do you." Marcus stepped closer, his anger trembling just beneath the surface. "Those photos mean nothing. It's not what it looks like." Jenna tilted her head slightly, studying him with quiet disbelief. "You should have chosen your lies more carefully. Vanessa Hartman isn't just your colleague. She's Leonard's wife." The color drained from his face. "How do you—" "I know," she cut him off. "I know everything." Marcus stumbled back, grasping the counter for support. "Oh my God! Leonard will kill me." Jenna took a sip of her coffee, watching him unravel. Maybe he should. At Evergreen Medical Center, the fallout began before noon. Staff members whispered in corridors, forwarding the email to others who hadn't seen it yet. Screens lit up with the same images, Marcus and Vanessa at the Mariners Hotel laughing, touching, entering a suite together. The gossip spread like wildfire, faster than any memo the hospital administration had ever sent. By 10 a.m. Dr. Leonard Hartman arrived at the orthopedic department. His usually calm face was carved with fury. He carried a printed copy of the email in one hand. The moment Marcus walked into the staff lounge, Leonard crossed the room and swung his fist. The blow landed hard, sending Marcus sprawling against a chair. "You humiliated me," Leonard snarled. "In my hospital, with my wife." "Leonard, please, it's not, save it. You're finished here. Security will escort you out." The word spread through the hospital before Marcus even reached the parking lot. By afternoon, his name was removed from the department roster, his access card deactivated. The hospital board released a short statement, effective immediately. Dr. Marcus Hamilton's employment has been terminated due to professional misconduct. Vanessa's world collapsed in parallel. When Leonard returned home that evening, she wasn't allowed through the door. Her designer's suitcase landed on the porch beside her. Rain starting to fall again. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the once perfect couple ended in silence. Marcus sat in his car for hours, staring at his phone, his inbox overflowing with messages, some pitying, most condemning. Every call from Vanessa went unanswered. At home, Jenna didn't check her phone once. She sat by the window, a quiet figure against the gray light. The rain outside softened the edges of the world, washing away the noise that had filled her life for too long. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even satisfied. What she felt was something far colder and purer. The truth had spoken for her, louder than she ever could. By evening, Marcus's name was trending in the local news. His reputation, once spotless, was now stained beyond repair. The man who had built his image on precision and control had lost everything because of his own carelessness. And Jenna, she simply watched the rain fall, unmoved, whispering to herself, "It's done." The papers were filed within a week. Jenna met with a quiet, composed attorney named Ellen Hayes, who handled the paperwork with the efficiency of someone who had seen too many endings. There was no courtroom drama, no shouting across conference tables, just signatures, initials, and the gentle rustle of legal documents that turned a marriage into a transaction. Marcus didn't contest anything. He couldn't. His reputation had already collapsed, his medical license under review, and every attempt to explain the scandal only deepened the humiliation. When they met in Ellen's office for the final signing, he looked thinner, smaller somehow, his suit hanging awkwardly on his frame. "Jenna," he said softly, when Ellen stepped out to make copies, "please, can we talk just for a minute?" She closed the folder in front of her. "There's nothing left to say." "I made mistakes," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Terrible ones. I lost everything, my job, my name. But we had years together. Doesn't that mean anything?" Jenna's expression didn't change. It did, once. I can fix this, he insisted. We can move somewhere new, start over. I'll find another position. Marcus, she interrupted gently, her tone calm but final. You don't need to fix anything. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. He stared at her, searching for a flicker of the woman who used to look at him with warmth. But her eyes were still unflinching. For the first time, he understood what real loss looked like. It wasn't loud or violent, it was quiet, absolute. When the final signatures were complete, Marcus extended his hand as if to shake hers. Jenna hesitated for a moment, then took it, not out of affection but closure. Outside, Seattle was draped in soft rain, the kind that blurred the horizon and made the world seem smaller. They stood on opposite sides of the porch, their shared life behind them boxed into neat legal language and notarized seals. Marcus set his briefcase in the car, then turned back to her. I'll always love you, he said. She nodded once. Then let that be enough. He lingered for a second, as if waiting for her to stop him, to offer a single thread of forgiveness. But when she didn't move, he climbed into the car and drove away. The taillights disappeared into the gray drizzle, swallowed by the city. Jenna stood there for a long time, the rain softening her hair, the smell of wet pavement filling the air. For years, she had imagined this moment would come with anger, shouting, or tears. Instead, it felt like silence after a long storm, an ending that didn't hurt, only emptied. She turned, walked back inside, and looked around the house one last time. The walls still held traces of laughter, the faint imprint of a life she had once believed unbreakable. But now it was just a space, no longer a home. The next morning, movers arrived. Jenna supervised quietly, labeling boxes, giving directions, making no effort to keep what didn't matter. By evening, she locked the door for the last time and drove toward the city. Her new apartment was small but bright, with large windows overlooking the rain-slick streets of downtown. When she opened them, the cool air rushed in, carrying the hum of traffic and distant voices. For the first time in years, the sound didn't feel lonely. It felt alive. A month passed quietly, the way rain fades into mist after weeks of downpour. Jenna's new apartment had become a sanctuary, modest, sunlit, alive with small sounds she had once forgotten to notice. The hum of the coffee maker, the distant music from the cafe across the street, the soft buzz of her phone as she worked late into the night. Silence no longer frightened her, it kept her company. One morning, as she checked her email between meetings, a name appeared in her inbox that made her pause. Jonathan Reed. She hadn't seen it in over 15 years. Her heart gave a small, startled flutter as she clicked it open. Hey, Jenna, the message began. I heard about what happened. I'm sorry for everything you've had to go through. I'm in Portland these days, working on river restoration projects. If you ever feel like getting away from the city, come visit. No expectations, just a walk and some coffee like old times. She reread the words, smiling faintly. Jonathan had been her first love, gentle, curious, the kind of man who noticed small things. Back then, life had pulled them in different directions. She did nursing school, he to environmental work out of state. She had always wondered what might have happened if they hadn't lost touch. That weekend, Jenna packed a small bag, filled her car's tank, and drove south. The highway stretched long and green through the Pacific Northwest, winding between rain-washed forests and silver streams. The further she drove, the lighter she felt, as if every mile peeled away the residue of years spent living for someone else's approval. By the time she reached Portland, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds. Jonathan was waiting near the station, holding a small bouquet of white daisies, the same flowers he used to bring her during finals week. He looked older, more grounded, but when he smiled, she recognized him instantly. Welcome back, he said, his voice warm. Jenna laughed softly. It's been a long time. Too long, he replied, handing her the flowers. You still like daisies? They're perfect, she said, meaning it. They walked along the riverfront, the Willamette glistening under soft golden light. Street musicians played nearby, children chased pigeons, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Jonathan told her about his work, the wildlife reserves, the quiet life he'd built. Jenna spoke about starting over, about finding peace in small things. He listened without pity, only understanding. You look different, he said. Lighter. Jenna smiled. Maybe because I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. As the sun dipped low, they paused on the bridge, watching the reflections ripple across the water. For the first time in years, Jenna felt no tension in her chest, no weight pressing behind her ribs. Just stillness. Jonathan turned to her, eyes kind. You're stronger than you think, you know. She looked out across the river, the wind brushing her hair. Maybe, she said, but strength isn't always loud. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It was about being seen again, fully, without judgment or expectation. The last light shimmered across the river as they walked on, side by side. She didn't just survive the betrayal, she rebuilt her peace.